It was a fall afternoon, and the streets of the suburbs seemed wrapped in a blanket of calm. Orange leaves carpeted the sidewalks as Maggie Harlow walked home with her 6-year-old daughter, Ellie, after school. The chilly wind blew softly, but there was something heavy in the air. Ellie walked in silence, which was unusual for the normally chatty girl. Maggie, used to her daughter's excitement about school adventures, glanced at her curiously. "Is everything okay, sweetie?" Ellie hesitated, but before she could answer, she stopped abruptly. Her normally bright eyes were locked on a narrow alley between two old brick buildings. Maggie followed her daughter's gaze, but saw nothing besides a worn-out trash can and a few plastic bags scattered on the ground. "Ellie, what is it?" Maggie tried again, crouching to her daughter's level. Ellie didn't respond. Her small hands trembled slightly as she pointed toward the alley. "There, Mommy?" "There what?" Maggie asked, trying to hide the unease creeping into her chest. "There's something there." Maggie looked again but didn't see anything unusual. "Sweetheart, it's just a trash can. Let's go, it's getting cold." She reached for her daughter's hand, but Ellie wouldn't budge. "Please, Mommy, look over there." Something about Ellie's insistence stirred Maggie. Ellie wasn't one to make a fuss over nothing. Against her instinct to just keep walking, Maggie sighed and decided to investigate. "Okay, but then we're heading straight home. Deal?" Ellie nodded, her eyes still fixed on the alley. Have you ever had a strange moment when a child seems to sense something you can't see? Tell us in the comments while the story continues. Walking hesitantly, Maggie approached the trash can. The sour smell of abandoned waste filled the air, and she already regretted giving in. Piled plastic bags, crumpled papers. Nothing seemed out of place. "There's nothing here, Ellie." "No, Mommy. Look closer." Maggie looked back and saw her daughter's face. Ellie's eyes were glassy with unshed tears, as if she was certain something important was there. Resigned, Maggie carefully pushed some of the bags aside. Each movement made a rustling sound in the quiet alley, and her breathing grew heavier. "It's just trash," she muttered to herself, but something deep in her gut told her otherwise. Then, beneath a layer of paper and debris, something faintly glinted. Maggie froze. The late afternoon light reflected off something golden, partially hidden. "Mommy, what is it?" Ellie asked in a low voice, as if sensing the answer was significant. Maggie hesitated before brushing away the remaining papers. The uncovered object was small, covered in a thin layer of grime, but as soon as she touched it, her hand trembled. It was a baby's gold bracelet. Engraved in cursive on it was a name. When Maggie read it, her heart skipped a beat. "Ellie." She stared at the object for a long moment, trying to comprehend what it meant. Her mind flooded with disconnected thoughts, but one thing was clear. That bracelet wasn't supposed to be there. "Is it mine?" Ellie asked again, stepping closer cautiously. I don't know, sweetie." Maggie quickly pocketed the bracelet in her coat, trying to stay calm. Her voice sounded strange even to herself. Maybe someone lost it, but she knew that wasn't true. The walk home was silent. Ellie seemed satisfied to have found whatever she had sensed, but Maggie didn't share the same peace. Each step felt heavier, as if the weight of the bracelet grew with every second in her pocket. Once home, Ellie went to play in her room, but Maggie couldn't relax. She went to the kitchen and pulled the bracelet out of her pocket, examining it under the kitchen's dim yellow light. The engraving was delicate, and the cold metal seemed to pulse in her hands. The memory hit her like lightning. The bracelet was identical to one Maggie had seen before. It was a gift she had received when Ellie was born. But that bracelet had been lost years ago. At least that's what she had believed. Later, as she tucked Ellie into bed, the girl asked, "Will you keep my bracelet safe, Mommy?" Maggie hesitated. "Yes, sweetie. I'll keep it somewhere safe." After Ellie fell asleep, Maggie took out her phone and began typing a message to Diana, an old friend who had helped Maggie through difficult times. But before finishing, she deleted it. How could she explain something like this? That night, Maggie went to the closet in the corner of her room. She pulled out an old box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were old photos, documents, and small keepsakes from Ellie's birth. Among them was a picture of a baby wearing an identical bracelet. "This doesn't make any sense," Maggie murmured to herself. But one thing was certain. The bracelet wasn't there by accident. Someone knew something about her past and had left it intentionally. And now Maggie had to find out who. The story is just beginning, but you can already feel the mystery, right? Who do you think left the bracelet there? Share your theory in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the continuation of this thrilling story. The next morning arrived cold and quiet. Maggie, still keeping the bracelet in her pocket, was distracted as she prepared breakfast for Ellie. The golden shine of that small object seemed fixed in her mind, like a puzzle piece she couldn't fit. Ellie, acting as if nothing had happened, devoured her toast. But every now and then, Maggie noticed her daughter stealing glances at the coat hanging on the chair, where the bracelet rested in the pocket. "You're going straight to Mrs. Thompson's house after school today, okay?" Maggie said, trying to sound casual. Ellie simply nodded, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. After dropping Ellie off at school, Maggie headed straight to work at the veterinary clinic, but her focus was far from the day's appointments. At one point, distracted, she almost knocked over a tray of surgical instruments, catching the attention of her boss, Meredith. "Are you okay, Maggie?" Meredith asked, her tone curious. "Yeah, just a rough night's sleep," Maggie lied, trying to regain her composure. Deep down, she knew she couldn't get through the day without trying to find answers. During her lunch break, she picked up her phone and finally sent the message to Diana. "I need to talk. Something's happening that I can't explain. Can you call me?" While waiting for a response, Maggie began searching for clues online. She looked up similar bracelets, trying to convince herself it was all a coincidence. But every photo she saw only confirmed what she already knew. That bracelet was unique, identical to the one Ellie had years ago. Hours later, Diana finally called back. "Maggie, what's going on? Are you okay?" "I don't know, Diana. I found something I thought was lost. Ellie's baby bracelet. It was in a trash can near the school." Diana was silent for a moment before asking cautiously, "Are you sure it's the same one?" "Yes, I'm sure. But how did it end up there? And why now? Look, this could be some strange coincidence, or maybe someone's trying to get your attention. But who? Are you still in contact with anyone from your past?" Diana's question brought back memories Maggie had tried to forget for years. Before Ellie was born, her life had been marked by difficult choices, people she had left behind, and a relationship that had nearly destroyed her. "I don't know, Diana, but if it's what I think, I need to find out the truth. Do you believe in coincidences? Or do you think everything happens for a reason? Let us know in the comments." At the end of her shift, Maggie decided to pick Ellie up from Mrs. Thompson's house. As she drove, her thoughts were a mix of fear and determination. Something from her past she had long avoided was now surfacing, whether she wanted it to or not. When she arrived, Ellie seemed normal, playing with the neighbor's dog. But on the way home, her daughter asked a question that froze Maggie in her tracks. "Mommy, do you know who left my bracelet in the trash?" Maggie took a moment to respond, trying to keep her voice steady. "No, sweetie, but I'm going to find out." Ellie was silent for a moment before murmuring, "Maybe it was a friend." "What do you mean, a friend?" "A friend I don't know yet." Maggie didn't answer, but Ellie's strange comment echoed in her mind. Later that night, after Ellie had fallen asleep, Maggie pulled the memory box from the closet again. She sifted through more photos, old notes, and finally a birth card that came with the original bracelet. A memory hit her. The bracelet had been sent by someone she never identified shortly after Ellie was born. At the time, Maggie assumed it was just an anonymous gesture of goodwill. But now she wondered if it was something much bigger. Determined to understand more, Maggie returned to the alley where she had found the bracelet. Under the dim glow of a streetlight, she examined the area for any missed clues. That's when she noticed something she had overlooked before. A small mark on the trash can. A nearly invisible drawing of a flower scratched into the metal. It reminded her of someone, a person she had met during the hardest months of her life. Maggie's heart tightened. That drawing was a symbol Ethan Crawley, a man from her past, used to make. "Ethan," she whispered to herself. Her shock was interrupted by a noise behind her. Maggie spun around quickly, but there was no one there, just the wind stirring the plastic bags on the ground. As she drove home, Maggie felt the weight of her discovery. Ethan was someone she hadn't seen in years, someone who knew about the darkest time in her life. But how was he connected to the bracelet? She knew she had to find him. If you were in Maggie's shoes, would you confront your past to find answers or try to protect the peace you've built? Let us know in the comments. Who do you think Ethan really is? Share your theory in the comments and subscribe to the channel to follow the next part of this thrilling story. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the kitchen curtains as Maggie prepared breakfast. Her thoughts were far from the morning routine. The bracelet, now clean and gleaming, sat on the table. Maggie stared at it as though it were an unsolvable riddle. Ellie shuffled into the kitchen, still sleepy, dragging her favorite blanket. She glanced at the bracelet briefly but said nothing. "Mommy, did my friend talk to you?" Ellie asked with the casualness of a child. Maggie froze for a moment, trying to comprehend. "Friend? What friend, Ellie?" "You'll meet him soon," Ellie replied with a mysterious smile before grabbing her glass of milk. Her answer left Maggie even more uneasy. Who was this friend? Later, while Ellie was at school, Maggie decided to seek help. She knew Ethan Crawley might hold the key to unraveling the mystery. But Ethan was someone who had vanished without a trace years ago. As she walked through the yard, she spotted Danny Rivera, the journalist who had recently moved into the house next door. He was carrying boxes into the garage and seemed open to conversation. "Sorry to bother you so early," Maggie began, trying to sound casual. "You're a journalist, right?" Danny wiped his hands on his jeans. Curious. "Yeah, I like digging into big stories." "Why?" "Got something interesting. It's complicated. I need to find someone. He was a friend, but he disappeared. I think he might be nearby." Danny frowned, studying her for a moment. "Give me his name. I'll see what I can do." "Ethan Crawley." Danny nodded. "I'll look into it." As Danny began his search, Maggie couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if someone followed her silently, always a step behind. Yet, she never saw anyone. After picking up Ellie from school, the little girl asked another unsettling question. "Mommy, do you think my friend is an angel?" "Why do you think that, sweetheart?" Maggie asked, trying to mask her nerves. "Because he said he takes care of us." Maggie forced a smile, but a chill ran through her. Have you ever had a strange gut feeling like Maggie's? Share your experience in the comments. We'd love to hear your stories. That evening, Danny showed up at Maggie's door with news. "I found an address. It looks like Ethan's living in an isolated house on the edge of town. Can you take me there?" Maggie asked without hesitation. "Sure, but we should be cautious. We don't know what we'll find." The road to Ethan's house was lined with dense trees, and the night was dark, with only the car's headlights cutting through the blackness. The house loomed like a shadow in the distance, an old structure nearly hidden by ivy. "This is it," Danny said, pulling the car to a stop. The house looked abandoned. The porch was covered in dry leaves, and the windows were broken, but a faint light glowed from the upper floor. "He's there," Maggie said, her heart racing. Inside, the house was dusty, but signs of life were evident. Dirty dishes in the sink, a chair with worn cushions. As they climbed the stairs, they found Ethan in a small room. He was sitting in an old armchair, a notebook in his hands. His face bore the marks of time and hardship, but his eyes still held the same intensity Maggie remembered. "Ethan," Maggie began, her voice trembling. He looked up, surprised but not hostile. "Maggie, you came back. I didn't have a choice. I need answers," she said, holding up the bracelet. "Why was this at Ellie's school? What do you know?" Ethan sighed, as if carrying the weight of the world. "I did it to protect you, but maybe I made a mistake." Before he could explain further, a noise echoed outside. Ethan went to the window and peeked through the curtains. "Were you followed?" he asked, alarmed. "Followed? No," Danny replied, surprised. Ethan shook his head, his worry deepening. "There's someone out there. You need to leave now." They left the house in a rush. Maggie felt the answers were so close, but her fear of putting Ellie in danger outweighed her desperation. "You have to tell me everything," Maggie insisted in the car, looking at Ethan. "Not now. Not while they're watching," Ethan replied, his tone dark. Maggie realized the mystery was only beginning to unfold, and for the first time, she wondered if she could fully trust Ethan. The tension is rising, and with every step, Maggie discovers she's entangled in something much bigger than she ever imagined. Who do you think is really behind all of this? Share your theories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for the next thrilling chapter of this story. That night, the silence felt heavier than usual. Maggie lay in bed, unable to close her eyes. Ethan's words echoed in her mind. "You need to leave now." The idea that someone might be watching her made her restless. She got up, took Ellie's bracelet, and locked it in a drawer in her bedroom. It wasn't just the physical object that concerned her, but what it represented. In the room next door, Ellie slept peacefully. Maggie stood for a few moments, watching her daughter, trying to draw from the calmness the girl seemed to carry so naturally. But Maggie knew the calm was deceptive. Danger was closing in, and she needed to act fast. The next morning, Danny arrived at the door early, holding a stack of papers and looking concerned. "I spent the night researching," he said, handing Maggie the papers. "Apparently, Ethan isn't the only person involved in this. There's a connection to a woman in the neighborhood. Someone named Abigail Crawford." Maggie felt a chill run down her spine. Abigail was her wealthy and influential neighbor, known for her community work and lavish charity events. She always seemed friendly, but there was something about her demeanor that unsettled Maggie. Why would Abigail be involved? Maggie asked, confused. She owns several properties around town, including a decommissioned research facility on the outskirts. There's been recent activity there. Maggie closed her eyes for a moment. Everything was connecting, but the picture was still incomplete. We need to check it out, Danny suggested. Not yet, Maggie said firmly. First, I need to talk to Abigail. That afternoon, Maggie walked to Abigail's mansion unannounced. She was greeted by the housekeeper, who hesitated before leading her into the sitting room. Abigail appeared minutes later, impeccable as always, with a smile that felt rehearsed. Maggie, darling, what a surprise. What can I do for you? I need answers, Maggie said bluntly. About you, and about my daughter. Abigail's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained her composure. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. You know exactly what I mean, Maggie retorted. Ellie's bracelet, the symbol on the trash can, the research center you own. It's all connected. What do you want with my daughter? Abigail leaned forward slightly, her eyes taking on a cold glint. Maggie, I think you're very confused. Ellie is a special child, but you're not seeing the bigger picture. I'm trying to help her. I don't need your help. Ellie is my daughter, and you have no right to interfere in our lives, Maggie said firmly. Abigail stood calmly and walked to the window, looking out at the garden. Do you really think you can protect her on your own? The world is not a kind place, Maggie. And Ellie, well, she's not like other children. Maggie felt the ground shift beneath her. What are you talking about? Abigail turned slowly, an enigmatic smile on her lips. You know she's special, and I have the resources to protect her. You, on the other hand, do not. Maggie clenched her fists, feeling anger rise. You're not taking my daughter from me. Abigail shrugged. This isn't a threat, Maggie. It's a fact. Back home, Maggie was trembling. The conversation with Abigail confirmed her worst fears. Something far bigger was happening, and Ellie was at the center of it. Danny arrived shortly after, bringing more information about the research center. I found out it was recently used to store advanced medical equipment. But the strange thing is, everything was transported there under strict secrecy. Maggie knew she had to go there. It was the only way to find the truth. I'll go with you, Danny insisted. No, I need to do this alone. You don't have to carry this alone, Maggie, Danny said, taking her hand. She hesitated but eventually agreed. Fine, but we have to be careful. That night, they left Ellie in Diana's care and set off for the research center. The road was dark and deserted, with trees casting eerie shadows along the way. When they arrived, the building looked abandoned, but faint lights glowed inside. The fence was partially collapsed, and they managed to slip in unnoticed. Inside, the air was cold and tense. Empty rooms, scattered files, and dusty machines gave the impression of abandonment. But in one specific room, they found something disturbing. On a table lay a dossier with Ellie's name on the cover. Inside were detailed medical records, old photos, and notes about her birth. This doesn't make sense, Maggie said, flipping through the pages. How do they know so much about her? Because they've been monitoring you from the beginning, Danny said, pointing to the photos. Before they could process the information, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Abigail appeared, flanked by two imposing men. I knew you'd come, Abigail said with a cold smile. You're not going to stop us, Maggie said, clutching the dossier. Abigail crossed her arms. You don't understand. This isn't about you. It's about Ellie, and what she could mean for the world. She's just a child, Maggie retorted angrily. No, Maggie. She's much more than that, Abigail replied as the men stepped forward. Running through the corridors with Abigail's men close behind, Maggie felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew she had to get out with the evidence. But more importantly, she had to protect Ellie. If you were in Maggie's shoes, would you confront Abigail head-on or find another way? Share your thoughts in the comments. Who do you think will come out on top? Subscribe to the channel to follow the thrilling conclusion of this story. The chase through the research center's corridors felt endless. Maggie clutched the dossier tightly against her chest as Danny ran beside her, glancing back constantly. The echo of Abigail's footsteps and her men's relentless pursuit filled the air. This way, Danny said, pulling Maggie toward a side door. They slipped into a room packed with old boxes and outdated equipment, panting heavily as they tried to stay hidden. We won't make it out through the main entrance, Maggie whispered, her mind racing for a plan. Danny scanned the room and pointed to a small window near the ceiling. That's our best shot. Using a stack of crates, Danny climbed up first and reached down to help Maggie. The cold night air greeted them outside, but the relief was short-lived. Abigail was there, standing by a black car and speaking on the phone. She's surrounding us, Maggie muttered, pulling Danny behind a nearby bush. We need to get to the car and get out of here, Danny suggested. No, if we leave now, she'll follow us. We need to distract her. Danny looked around and found a rock. I'll break a window on the other side of the building. That should buy us some time. As Danny moved away to execute the plan, Maggie stayed hidden, watching Abigail. Her posture was calm, but Maggie could feel the threat in every deliberate movement. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the air, and Abigail turned sharply, ordering her men to investigate. Taking the opportunity, Maggie sprinted to Danny's car. He joined her seconds later, and they sped off, leaving Abigail furious at the building's entrance. As they drove back to town, Maggie opened the dossier again. The information inside was chillingly detailed. Records of Ellie's birth, medical notes, and even observations about her behavior over the years. They've been watching us from the beginning, Maggie said, her voice trembling. Danny kept his eyes on the road, trying to process what they had uncovered. But why? Why is Ellie so important to them? I don't know, Maggie replied. But one thing I do know. She's my daughter, and no one is going to take her from me. When they arrived at Diana's house, Maggie found Ellie asleep on the couch, clutching her favorite blanket. The sight of her peaceful face filled Maggie with a mix of love and unyielding determination. Danny followed her inside and immediately closed the curtains. We need to be ready. Abigail won't back down easily. I know, Maggie replied, gazing at Ellie. But now we have something against her. We need to take this to the prosecutor. The next day, Maggie and Danny met with the prosecutor, Alan Cartwright, a serious and methodical man. He listened intently as Maggie recounted everything. If even half of what you're saying is true, Abigail Crawford is in serious trouble, Alan said, flipping through the dossier. It's more than true, Maggie asserted, and I need to ensure my daughter's safety while this is happening. Alan nodded. I'll launch a formal investigation. This will take time, but with these documents, we have a strong case against Abigail. We don't have much time, Danny interjected. She's powerful. She'll try to silence us before this goes public. I'll arrange protection for you, Alan assured them, But you'll need to be careful. That night, for the first time, Maggie felt like she had a real chance to stop Abigail. But fear still lingered. As Ellie played in her room, Maggie and Danny combed through the dossier, trying to piece together Abigail's interest in Ellie. Danny began hesitantly. There's something in here that concerns me. What is it? These notes. They suggest Ellie might have been born with a rare condition. Something that makes her special. Maggie frowned. Special how? I'm not sure. But it seems Abigail believes Ellie is unique. Maybe even a key to something bigger. Maggie felt her world crumble. She's just a child. No matter what these papers say, no one has the right to treat her as anything but that. You're right, Danny agreed. But Abigail won't give up easily. We need to be ready for the worst. In the early hours of the morning, Maggie was jolted awake by a noise from the living room. Grabbing the baseball bat she kept under her bed, she crept downstairs. The front door was wide open. Ellie! Maggie rushed to her daughter's room, only to find it empty. Panic consumed her. Danny! He came running, trying to make sense of the situation. Where is she? She's been taken, Maggie said, her voice breaking. On the floor of Ellie's room, they found a note. Last chance. Give up. In the darkest moment of her life, Maggie realized she couldn't trust anyone but herself. Abigail had crossed the line, and now Maggie would stop at nothing to bring her daughter back. If you were in Maggie's shoes, what would you do to protect the one you love? Share your thoughts in the comments. The story has reached its most critical point. Will Maggie be able to confront Abigail and save Ellie? Leave your theories in the comments and subscribe to the channel for the thrilling conclusion of this story. Maggie drove through the deserted city streets with Danny by her side. Adrenaline kept her awake, but her mind was consumed by one thought: finding Ellie before it was too late. The note left in her daughter's room was a cruel reminder that Abigail was willing to do anything to get what she wanted. She's probably at the research center, Danny said, holding the dossier. If Abigail's gone this far, she's likely using that place as her base. Maggie gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. If Ellie's there, I'll bring her back, and no one's going to stop me. When they arrived at the research center, the place looked even more foreboding under the cold light of dawn. Abigail had increased security. 2 guards patrolled the entrance, and a new fence had been installed around the perimeter. How are we getting in? Danny asked. Maggie scanned the area, assessing the situation. The east side. I saw a fallen section of the fence last time. Moving quietly, they used the darkness to their advantage. After crossing the perimeter, they slipped into the building through a side door Danny managed to unlock. The interior was too quiet. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the empty corridors, heightening the tension. What if this is a trap? Danny asked. It doesn't matter, Maggie replied. I'll go to the end of the line for Ellie. They entered a room that looked like a laboratory. In the center was a table surrounded by machines, as if someone was being monitored. Maggie rushed to investigate and found a notebook filled with notes. The words Project Genesis were scrawled across the cover. This is bigger than we thought, Danny said, flipping through the pages. I don't care what it is, Maggie said. I just want my daughter back. Before they could leave, they heard footsteps. Abigail entered, flanked by 2 armed men. I knew you'd come back, Abigail said with a cold smile. Where's my daughter? Maggie yelled, stepping forward. Ellie is safe, Abigail replied, as if offering a favor. And she'll be even safer once she's far away from you. You don't have the right to decide that, Maggie shot back, her voice full of fury. "I have every right," Abigail said calmly. "Ellie is special. She can change the future. And you, Maggie, you're an obstacle that needs to be removed." In that moment, Danny acted quickly. He hurled a chair into one of the machines, creating a loud crash that distracted Abigail and her men. Maggie seized the opportunity to run into the hallway. Abigail barked orders, but Maggie was already gone. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it might explode, but she didn't stop. At the back of the building, she found a locked door secured with a heavy padlock. "Ellie," Maggie shouted, banging on the door. "I'm here, Mommy." Ellie's voice came from the other side, small and full of fear. Maggie frantically searched the area and found a metal bar. She started working on the lock, her arms burning with effort. Finally, the lock gave way, and the door swung open. Ellie was sitting in the corner, her face lighting up as she saw her mother. "I knew you'd come," Ellie said, clinging to Maggie. "I will always come for you," Maggie replied, tears streaming down her face. The sound of Abigail and her men closing in pushed Maggie into action. Danny appeared, holding the Project Genesis notebook. "We have to go now," he said. Maggie scooped Ellie into her arms, and they ran through the corridors with Danny close behind. As they reached the exit, Abigail's voice echoed behind them. "This isn't over, Maggie. You can't protect Ellie from every danger in the world." But Maggie didn't care. The only thing that mattered was Ellie's safety. Hours later, back at Diana's house, Maggie watched Ellie sleeping peacefully on the couch. Danny placed the Project Genesis notebook on the table and sighed. "We made it out, but Abigail won't stop," Danny said. "Not this time," Maggie replied. "The prosecutor has everything he needs. We'll make sure she never gets near Ellie again." In the days that followed, Abigail was arrested. The evidence against her, combined with her involvement in Project Genesis, was enough to secure a conviction. Maggie testified in court, facing Abigail one last time. "You've lost," Maggie said, looking her in the eye. Abigail smiled, but her gaze was filled with hatred. "You don't understand what's at stake. I may have lost, but the world will still need Ellie." Her words lingered in Maggie's mind, but she knew she had won the most important battle, protecting her daughter. Back home, Maggie began rebuilding her life. Danny stayed by her side, helping her heal from the trauma and create a better future for Ellie. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," Danny said one evening as they watched Ellie playing in the yard. "I'd do it all over again," Maggie replied. Do you believe a mother's love can overcome any obstacle? Share your thoughts in the comments. The story is reaching its conclusion, but the weight of Maggie's choices will stay with us. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the final chapter of this emotional journey. The sun rose on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and casting a warm glow over Maggie's small house. In the yard, Ellie played with her dog, her laughter filling the crisp morning air, while Danny prepared coffee in the kitchen. It was the first peaceful morning in months, free from threats or lingering fears. Maggie sat on the porch, holding Ellie's bracelet. The object that once carried so much mystery and fear now seemed like a symbol of what they had overcome. She ran her fingers over the engraved letters and took a deep breath. Ellie is safe. That's all that matters, she murmured to herself. Danny appeared at the door, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. You're thinking about everything that happened, aren't you? A little, Maggie admitted, accepting the mug. It's still hard to believe it's over. Abigail is behind bars, and Ellie can finally have the childhood she deserves. Danny nodded, though his expression remained serious. "It's over for now. But you know there will always be people like her." Maggie glanced at Ellie, who was laughing as the dog chased after a ball. "I know. But now I know I can protect her." Always, Ellie seemed to have moved past the traumatic events. Her questions about Abigail and the mysterious friend who claimed to protect her had subsided, though Maggie knew those memories might resurface one day. "I dreamed about my friend again," Ellie said one night as Maggie tucked her into bed. "What did he say, sweetie?" Maggie asked softly. "He said you're really brave, and that we're safe because you never give up." Maggie smiled and kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'll never give up on you, Ellie. Never." In the following days, Maggie began writing her story. Encouraged by Danny, she decided to turn her experiences into a book. "If you tell your story, you could help others," Danny said as he reviewed her early drafts. "I'm not a writer," Maggie replied with a laugh. "But you have a story worth telling." She considered it for a moment. Perhaps sharing her journey could bring meaning to everything they had endured. If you knew someone like Maggie, what words of encouragement would you offer to help them move forward? Share your thoughts in the comments. One afternoon, Maggie received a call from prosecutor Alan Cartwright. "I have good news," Alan said. "Abigail has been convicted, and the case is officially closed." Maggie let out a sigh of relief. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means for me and Ellie." "You've been incredibly strong," Alan replied. "Very few people would have done what you did." As she hung up the phone, Maggie felt, for the first time in a long while, a weight lift from her shoulders. That evening, as Maggie and Danny sat down to dinner with Ellie, the mood was light and hopeful. Danny looked at Maggie with a smile. "So, what's next?" "I don't know," Maggie admitted honestly. "But for the first time, I'm not afraid of the future." Danny reached for her hand. "That's a good start." In the yard, Ellie ran through the flowers, laughing as the dog followed close behind. Maggie watched the scene with a smile. The sun was shining, the breeze was gentle, and for the first time in years, everything felt at peace. She knew the past would always be part of who she was, but it no longer defined her. Maggie had a future to build with Ellie and Danny, and that was all that mattered. What moved you the most in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us what starting over means to you. Do you believe love and courage can overcome any challenge? Subscribe to the channel for more heartfelt stories like this one. Until next time,